So, hi, Yaacov. It's great that you're going to be having this conversation as part of this What is Life series. I'm aware that we were going to film, but that we're in lockdown because of this virus. So we're doing it like this. One of the reasons we were going to do this now is you have this book just out. Maybe you can show that to everyone. So there it is. Yeah,
well, hey Tim, hey everybody. There you go. There it is.
Isn't it beautiful?
Bright and new.
What's the subtitle? Shaman is such a strong title. What's the subtitle?
Yeah, it's invoking power, presence, and purpose at the core of who you are. But you know what it's like. But it's been a real labor of love. This one.
Fantastic.
Really
so it feels like, you know, the first thing I have to say is that obviously we know each other, which is not always true with the people I have these conversations with. And the reason we've got to know each other is that, and I've said this to you many times in private, and I'm now going to say it here in public, is that I find you and Susanna, your wife, of immense integrity, great compassion, and I trust you. And you are coming at life, you know, a book's called Shaman. You call yourself a shaman, and there's an approach to life that comes through that. So one of the many things that attracted me towards the idea of having a conversation like this with you was to see how your perception of what this is from your journey, which has made you end up moving to a shamanic perspective, how that relates to what I've been exploring. And so let's start with that. So you've done the book. Why do you call yourself a shaman? What is it? What is that? What does that mean? What's your view of reality through those eyes?
Thank you, Tim. Well, I mean, first of all, just thank you very much for your very kind words. They really, it's lovely to hear them. It's really nice, very warming. I feel a kind of warmth just to be with you and be with the people who are listening to this. And thank you. It's lovely. I could say the same. In fact, I'm going to. When we've become mates and we've become close because I really love the way you're exploring and your openness to life, and you're following the thread. You know, I read your soul story book, and I love the way it literally was like a winding path, but with it going through really fascinating landscapes, and that each one of them named something recognizable. And then some other things were like new possibilities, like new landscapes. So that's very interesting, exciting for me. Coming to your question, or that initial, what is this shaman thing all about?
Yeah. What is this shaman thing all about?
What is this? I'm a white Jewish guy living
Yaacov.
in Yemen.
I mean, it's a Jewish, right?
Born in Liverpool. What happened?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really it's a long story, but it's been a very strong story for me to get to the place where now I'm comfortable in the role and the naming of shaman. It's been hard because my cultural shamanic heritage is somewhat buried. It is there within Judaism. It's buried within the time and the modality and the way of thinking. It's been somewhat overlaid with a lot of silt and mud and exoticism, and it's also my personal journey was all about finding a language that made sense of my own experience. So I wasn't looking for shamanism, I was looking for something that made sense of my experience. And when I discovered something called shamanism, and this thing of the tree of life and the spirit and the body and the cycles and the things that made sense to me and made sense of a love of the mystery that I've always had, it just seemed like, well, it seems to be called shamanism, so I'm going to follow that road and see where it leads. and it's led me in loads of different directions.
That I can bear testimony to. But can you, through that, I mean, shaman, obviously there's lots of different shamanic traditions. They all get put together. They're all different, actually, of course, like everything. They're all unique and have different approaches and different techniques. But there is something, isn't there? There's something which is very ancient. It feels like, from my reading of history, it feels like human beings came into some form of soul consciousness and developed something we now call shamanism. And it hasn't stayed still since those very, very early times. Of course, it's developed and evolved. It keeps changing, but there is something. Have you been able to kind of nail that something? What is it? Nice, easy question.
Yeah, nice, easy question. I'm really letting that land. I can feel it land, and it's shaking in my backbone, that question, because it's been essentially my quest, and because it's essentially a quest for self, understanding of self. So where I've arrived at in this moment with what it is it's a direct, physical, embodied experience of connection to the divine through the physical world, through the immanent, touchable, sensible, physical world, through the body, through earth, through fire, through sunlight, through water, through wind, through the elemental powers. And then where I know we've had some really interesting connections is it's through that connection, through that anchor, if you like, there is a space to connect to the imaginal, to the unseen, to the as yet unformed, the non-physical world, whether that's something that feels like ancestry, or something that feels like spirits, or something that feels like a living earth, something that has that story to it. And it's a story which is basically original systems thinking. It's basically a recognition of each individual piece of this puzzle being interconnected.
So that's really interesting, isn't it? Because I really get that. And this is massively broad, big thinking. This is not obviously huge generalization, but it feels like human beings at some point, the what we now recognize as the human experience of the imaginal, this other realm we're in right now, where we're having meaning and ideas, started to arise, and we were becoming self-conscious of ourselves and our environment. And it looks like you said, that the first thing that human beings did was they experienced the divine, the sense of wonder, the oneness, but in the world. And then at a certain point, maybe the Axel age, 2,500 years ago, or whenever it was, there seems to be a movement into transcendence, where suddenly it's all about getting away from here, that this is some illusion, this is not the place to be.
Yes.
And that was a phase. I feel like I've been through all these phases, actually. And then what seems to be happening now, which really intrigues me, is it feels like all of that's coming back, and there's a sense in which there's that lovely name that Gebster, I think, was the first person who used it, but Ken Wilber's used it a lot, of integrating, integral. That somehow we've actually. Sorry, I'm getting a bit lost here, but this seems important to lay the foundation for what we're trying to do. It feels like you and I have lived through a phase which is more to do with being individualistic and relativistic. Everyone's got their own thing. You make your own truth. You find your own spirituality, and you're a shaman. I'm a Sufi. You're a this. I'm a Buddhist. Whatever it is. Yeah. And then it feels like now with our children, I watch them, and they're moving into something quite different. And we're part of that because we're still here, which is integrating it. How does it all fit together? How does that transcendent fit with that shamanic immanent? And how does that? resonate?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, on a personal level, I do. You said, you're describing a lot experiences that you've been through, that transcendence, and for me, certainly transcendence. It wasn't really transcendence. It was more like route one out of here, because
Right.
here wasn't a very safe place to be. Didn't feel like a safe place. Didn't feel recognizable. Felt other. Felt incongruent. Felt dangerous. Whereas there, in the imaginal, in the dream, as a child, I couldn't wait to get to bed because my dream life was far more real to me than my waking life. Had much more substantial, much more of a substantial feeling to it. It was where I was safe,
And
actually.
and yet you've ended up, I mean, you do a lot of what you do is about movement, right? So
It's
you've ended up
yeah.
right into the body to.
Well, that's the interesting thing. I was running away from experience. I was using that capacity I have to dream. We all have that capacity to be somewhere else than in the body, physically present. I was using that as distraction, well, survival mechanisms. And then also, when I was younger, really young, getting into this, it was all about going somewhere else. It was all about being in some better other place, and
And yet
that suited me. It was
it's,
exotic. It
but
was exciting.
I was just thinking about it because I'm thinking it's like, but the shamanist thing, it's because it's actually, like you said, it's not it's not just about get out in nature, is it? I mean, it's rooted in nature, but it is also very much in the imaginal. I mean, that's where all the
Totally.
shamanic work gets done.
Yeah.
If you take ayahuasca, you end up there, don't you? It's like, whoa, just like,
Totally.
you're just. So it's more like, it feels more like we, at a certain point, we tried to get out of experience
Yeah.
into something which was the transcendent, numinous,
Yeah.
non-dual,
Yeah.
and that shamanism is kind of not just in nature. It's the whole. It's really rich in the actual experience.
It's the tree of life. It's roots, trunk, and branches, and it's the
Okay.
connection between them. And I think that's, you talked about the evolution in our children's generation. How there's that feeling of, let's now integrate individuality and we-ness. Let's evolve the things that we've learned into something a little bit more um, interconnected, living in that knowledge of interconnection and living in that bridge between imaginal experience and physical experience, and learning about how do they relate? How does my story relate to my lived experience? How does what I imagine about reality affect the way I experience reality? And what choice do I have about that? And the body, and which wasn't my best friend. I used it a lot, but I didn't like dancing. When I discovered dancing, I wasn't looking to dance. I was looking for shamanism. I ignored the whole bit of the write-up that said dance. And when I got into the room, this was with Gabrielle Roth in a dojo in London in 1988. There were all these people in their leotards stretching, and I was like, what's going on? No, this is like, I've got to, oh my God, I've signed up to dance for 3 days with these people. I was freaked out. But I tell you what, I was within about an hour, Gabrielle, who at that time was a really wild creature. She was like long black leather jacket and dark sunglasses, beautiful black hair, absolutely very exotic being. And she kind of waltzed into this space like a whirlwind. And within about 20 minutes, she had me, she'd seduced me. I don't mean sexually, I mean, out of my thinking about what might or should or would or did or will happen into this that moves. This is movement. You just have to shift your attention from what you're thinking about into the experience that's happening in your body, and the intelligence of life that is movement, that lives your body, moves to the beat, and just let go and see what happens. And it freaked me out because it was amazing. It was just like, wow, all this creativity. I had no idea.
Well, yeah, I can really relate to that. I mean, I had my journey in was less dramatic, I suspect, and but I was very far out. And when it came through me through Tai Chi, and that was in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, and just really didn't know I had a body really. But the question I want to ask you is that from the later spiritual traditions, the central teaching, which is not very really popular these days, I don't think really, well, kind of is, but is absolutely central, and I actually have sympathy for it and think we can make sense of it, is that essentially you are not the body, that essentially you are the soul, you're this imaginal level of reality in relationship with a body, and that's what survives death and what actually goes through a process of transmigration. How does that sit with the shamanic tradition? When did that develop, do you think? Does that ring for you personally and with the tradition?
Well, I think that's the evolution that we're in. Is for me, what I'm really fascinated by is how those two different conditions marry up and give us the experience of living in a body on this earth. And so the more I get to know this thing as earth or as fire or as water or wind or as roots or as branches or as animal, the more I get to know it as part of the wildness of nature, of how life moves through this world when it's allowed to get on with itself. That married to this extraordinary eternity or sense of like foreverness or vastness and beyond time and beyond physicality. And how do they, like, to me that's like dream, and this is physical manifestation of dream. And shamanism for me is this how do I bring that here? How do I bring heaven to earth, in a sense?
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, there's an evolutionary prayer at the heart of shamanism, which is well-being for nature, that which is us too, well-being and connection and interconnectivity and ground and root through which to land the experience of the purity, the magnificence of spirit together here.
So do you think that there is a sense, like when you're in the rainforest or something, it's hard now because all the traditions are changing all the time, but I presume but do you have a sense of how it is traditionally seen the purpose of life, if you like, from that perspective, from a perspective that didn't have all the knowledge we now have about the nature of the universe? And how has that changed, and what's your synthesis of the two?
Well, we started about the whole thing about me being a white Jewish guy living in Devon, and I don't practice Amazonian shamanism, or I'm not. That's the thing that I had to really learn from all these different indigenous traditions. They were all saying to me, look, you're not Native American, you're not Assami, you're not Amazonian, you're a white Jewish guy from Liverpool, and your job is to translate this experience into something that makes sense to you and your people and your land. And that's what our work is. We'll come to that afterwards, but maybe.
Yeah, no, we should. We definitely should come to that.
Yeah. So the indigenous people in the Amazon now that we get to visit, I'll talk about. There's two tribes we work with: the Achua and the Zapara, and they're two different tribes. The Achuar are a warrior people. They're really strong. Their story is, we've never been defeated, ever. Even when the conquistadors came, they were like, they're fierce, and they used to kill each other a lot. And they decided to stop doing that because they saw that there was a bigger threat that was coming to the forest. So they unified. Amazing. That's an amazing story in itself.
That is an amazing story. Yeah. God, that's.
You know how they did it? I'll tell you just briefly.
Yeah, do.
It's so fascinating. They dreamt that there was a Catholic priest somewhere in Europe who would be able to help them to make peace. And they found him. They somehow got in touch with this guy, whether it was through the language of dreams, or they didn't have mobile phones in those days or connection. But they found a way of connecting with this guy, and he accepted their invitation. Of course, he tried to get them to be good Catholics, but in the end, he became more like them. They loved him. He died a few years ago. Young Kwan, they called him. They even gave him an Achuar name. And he helped them, bless him, to make peace. Amazing. Like, what a story.
That is a fantastic story.
And so they're warriors, these people. And they're very proud. And they're very secure in their sense of self, their sense of cultural identity and place. One thing I noticed very quickly when I went there is that's very different to us is they don't judge. They don't start by seeing something different and going, don't like that, or it should be like this, or we do it like this and they do it. Why did they observe? They observe and they go, they're curious. Well, you're doing it like that. I wonder what the outcome of that action is. And they're by no means perfect. They're just a human being like you and me with all their own stories going on. But in terms of their shamanism, it's interesting because they've made peace, but their shamans haven't yet. And, the shamans...
Wow, that's so interesting.
It is.
What? Sorry, go more.
It's not that they're actively at war, though some of them are. There's always been that in shamanism. In South America, in the forest, you don't hire a lawyer to destroy somebody, you hire a shaman.
Yeah.
And that's been that part of that culture. And it's one of the things, of course, I've had to deal with is what do you do with that power? Are you willing to do harm? Are you willing to, and for me, that's an absolute bottom line no-no. And last time I was there, in January, we were doing our formal introductions, and one of the elders said to me, look, they were talking about the trouble they were having with the Ecuadorian government, and they said, well, you're a shaman, could you do him some damage, the president? I was like, no, I can't. No.
I'm really pleased you brought this up because we could have easily missed this, and because it's something I'm always very aware of because I like to see things from many sides, is that there's a massive romanticization of older cultures, these very different cultures that live in very different ways. Indigenous, let's call them, whatever that really means. But those, we know who we're talking about. But those, there's a lot of darkness there as well, isn't there? That in the world of magic, there is always it's not nice.
It's not nice. No, it's really not nice. It's hardcore. It's the jungle. It's the jungle. It's live and die, and death is always in the room, and it's always present, and it's sharp, and it's wild, and there is that element to it. I think it's partly, I love that wildness. At the same time, one of the things you asked about what's there in that culture is there's a confrontation always, as far as I've been told, in the training of a shaman in the forest. There's a confrontation with that darkness or that shadow self. And people make different choices. Quite, more people choose to go with it because it promises something. There's a promise of power or money or, as many women as you want if you're a guy. That, there's a promise of something. There's a seduction.
Yeah.
And many people take that way.
Yeah.
People who do that kind of work earn more money than healers.
Yeah. So is there a sense in which the shamanic skills are kind of amoral in the sense that they're neither good nor bad? They're just like anything. It's like having a army or anything. It's like, it's not what you have, it's what you do with it that makes it of any ethical quality.
It's like power. It's entirely
it's like power.
Entirely neutral. And it's entirely down to that confrontation, which road you choose. And when I was doing training in the Amazon, I thought I'd made that choice a very long time ago. I was like, don't be ridiculous.
Right.
What are you talking about? Like, I know I made that choice. And these old guys, one younger guy and one older guy, they were like, you don't know, but we can see that lust for power in you that you haven't owned yet. We can see that, lust to do harm. Look for it. And I was like, oh, no way, man, forget it. No. And but step by step, and I went kicking and screaming the whole way. It wasn't pretty. I got to meet that in myself. I got to go to that crossroads and see that part of myself. I didn't want to see it. I didn't like seeing the Yaacov that was capable of really consciously doing harm.
Right.
I didn't like that part of me that could be ice cold and dismissive and completely the opposite of compassionate. I didn't like it. I didn't want to know it as part of me. But,
so is that part that is that because given that you've said this, it's not always very, it's not always for the good, but is that an essential part of the training for generally, do you think, or is it just different people?
I think if you go down that route, I mean, Amazonian, I don't recommend that to anyone.
Right.
It's something that I was really called there in my dreams. I really felt I have to go there. I didn't, I had a whole different idea of what it would be than what it was. And if I'd have known, I wouldn't have gone. I promise you. I really wouldn't have gone. Right. Because it was hell for me.
But glad you did?
Totally. Yeah, because of that confrontation.
Yeah.
Because in that confrontation, I became safer as a human being. I became safer with my power. Because I realized I can't say no to doing harm if I haven't owned that I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had to experience it and see that road.
So maybe this is a good time to actually, before I say that, I can't remember if I've ever said this to you. I probably have, but just occurs to me, it's relevant to this conversation, is 20 years ago, I wrote 2 books on shamanism. One Native American spirituality, and then one which was really interviews with shaman from all different traditions who I went and spent time with, and then wrote about. And so this
time I read them.
So it's kind of making me think, oh yeah, this is retouching things for me too. So jumping from the Amazon to Devon in England,
yeah.
How does all of that now resurface, reintegrate? How do you think this can come back in and be part of our future?
Well, thank you for that question, because it's really at the heart of why I wrote this book. It's exactly for that reason, because my belief or my passion is that everyone has this shamanic part of themselves. I call it, for want of a better word, the inner shaman. Not you are a shaman, but you have access to that archetypal energy. It's an archetypal part of our
human capacity. Yeah, it definitely is, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah.
Good point.
And that, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And that part of us is already embodied, rooted, and a really good dreamer, and is in the experience of interconnection, is in that experience, recognizes it, therefore loves life outside, because recognizes that life, nature, others, difference, diversity as part of self. A bit like we're being forced to right now in some way. We can't, it's harder for us in the middle of this pandemic to really be totally separate from him over there or them over there, because we're all in, we've kind of landed in a situation of being in this together to a degree. Hopefully much more, I hope, that we make that meaning from it. So coming into how we work and why I think it's helpful is our whole thing is to help people to become present in the body, really present in the body. It's not to say I am the body, but to become present, that consciousness and physicality are in the same place. And from that ground, then to work, to create, to dream, to work with the material of our biographies, our experience, the material of our ancestry, the material of our wounds, the material of our traumas, the material of what we dream, what really matters to us, what we love, what we care for, like to start to shape that as a dance, to make this physicality more of a receptacle for that dream, that it can be here because the body, if it's not allowed to move, it just becomes like the physical shape of our history. And
Ooh.
by the time
that's lovely. It becomes like the physical shape of our history. That's right.
And then, by a certain point, we can't move anymore because we're full. We're full of emotion, and we're full of history, and we're full of experience, and we're full of pain, and we're full of food, and we're full of distraction. We just, that's like, it's painful, very damaging place for us as individuals, and very damaging for our environment. It's not good for the world, that way of being. It's not creating what we are capable of. I see such magnificence in us human beings. Really. I mean, that's why I work, and that's what I give my attention to. We're just amazing. What we can survive, the meaning we can make of horror, and how we can create art from horror, and evolution and kindness and healing. So for me, that's our work, and that's how we work, is get present, so that the life that's inside that history, the life that lives the body, that is movement, that is the intelligence of life. We call that the unbroken.
The unbroken, that's nice. So that really is integration, isn't it? It's the integration between the imaginal and the biological, or the physical,
Totally.
and bringing them, making sure they're part of the same.
Yeah, and then when you sleep at night, when you fall asleep at night, your spirit can fly free from your body.
Yeah,
that's also true. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's like, it's lovely to let the attention go to all these places, but that they're all part of one thing, and that we don't miss that, so that we can move between them, and somehow the understanding which I'm looking for as a philosopher, with my that hat on, is about that. It's about, how can I understand how this whole one thing fits together in such a way that honors every part, So it's not rejecting the world as Maya, the illusion about. There's no bad thing in it. There's badness in it, of course, and but there's no element of it which is like it's all part of this one thing, which is moving forward, which is constantly changing and evolving and becoming richer and richer and richer.
Absolutely, it's my deepest experience of what you're talking about is that there's no exception in the embrace of the divine, or that's not part of wholeness, of universe, of consciousness. There's nothing that can be excluded. It's the consciousness is the sum total of everything. And
so I would like to I was going so fast. I knew it would. I want to try an idea on you, Yaacov, and if I may not be able to articulate it quickly enough for it to really make sense, and if it does, I just apologize to you and everyone else. But I'm going to have a go, because I can't share this idea with many people and get a response, and it may not be one you resonate with, and I'm ready for that. That's fine by me. You know that. So this is where it's come up. So I remember you and I actually having a conversation quite a long time ago about this idea of spirits, and spirits in rocks, and spirits in rivers, and spirits in plants, and all of that. And then there's a friend of mine in America who I've been to a lot of my work and been involved with me very much, and young woman who's got very involved with the ayahuasca and doing a lot of ceremony and really taken off and got a lot from it. She's got the plant is tattooed on her back. It's just amazing. It just anyway, so she's beautiful. And another person who's been to a number of my events who's from England, actually has gone across and done work with her and came back to me and went, I really like this shamanic thing. It's really speaking to me. But I have real trouble with this idea of the spirits in the rocks and all of this. And how do you make sense of that, Tim? Can you make sense of that for me? Or is it just like, no? And we talked about it, and I hadn't felt like I had made sense of it. And I've been working on it, trying to make sense of it. And this is what I've come up with. Now, obviously, so I have a problem with just taking the traditional view. That there are somehow conscious beings that inhabit. I can just about imagine it for a particular plant. But like when you take a rock and it's got a spirit and then you break it in two, and has it got two spirits now, or all of that, all those problems that arise, and the river, where does the spirit end or start, and all of that, and where do they come from, and we've got such a good biological sense of the evolution of the natural world, we don't really need fairies to make the plants grow anymore.
Yeah.
However, I also know, because I'm not a reductionist materialist remotely, I also know what it's like to enter that state where you're going, I feel the spirit of a place, I feel the spirit of a tree, I feel the spirit. So here very short is the way I've kind of ended up thinking about it. It's all work in progress. So is to say, in my philosophy, it's look, everything is the evolution of information in time, and that information's accumulating. That's what the universe is. And so everything has identity because it's made of its past. So you and I are both made of our pasts, and this room is made of its past. Everything is actually made of its past, which is its information. And everything which forms any sort of identity, you and I have a clear one, the room less clear, but it's still got one to do with place and its history, has an historical sense of information. Now, obviously, I don't think personally that the room is sitting here conscious of me, like you and I are, but it's still a time stream or an information stream. And I wonder if what's happening is that when you enter those deep imaginal spaces, you can relate through your imagination. You can tune into that stream of information, that stream of time of a place, of a rock, and then break, and it's two, because it's two streams, which all go back to the one, and that it can speak to you through your own imaginal powers, that by opening to it, to use your language of images and of thoughts, you can relate to something which in itself isn't conscious or like that, but the spirit is kind of its essence, its history, what it's been. Does that, I just wanted to try that. Does that make sense? Did I?
It does, yes. Yeah, well done. Brilliant. Lovely. I really followed your thread.
Oh, good.
Great. I'll tell you the thing that, the key for me of what you just said, what really touched something, like rang a bell in me, was everything's made of its past. So if you take a rock and you split it in two, its past was that it was one.
Yeah.
Then I saw that rock split into two, or split into 100 or 1,000 or a billion, or a number that I can't think of. And I go, well, that's everything.
Yeah.
That's what we are.
Yeah.
That's precisely everything.
Yeah.
So when I'm in that state of consciousness, I relate to everything as we were there at the beginning, because there was nothing. If there was, and Lord, just the big zero, and then everything was, our collective past was that. We were one.
So for me, the thing, it's like the oneness seems obvious. It's the individuality which is so mysterious.
Yeah.
It's that what makes a thing, what makes something. And so that sense of like this place or this river or this tree.
Yes.
And wanting to make a bridge between that intimate feeling of that you can speak to it.
Yes.
Without it actually being, of imagining that every rock has a fairy, or that it's actually a more natural evolving process than that, which you can still almost like what happened was that human beings at a certain point realized that through their own experience of soul, which is all they knew, they would project that out onto the world, and they would understand naturally, thunder was a god, and the river was a god, and everything, because that's what they had to understand. And it could speak to them, and they could learn from it. There was a way of gleaning information. This plant will do this. This plant will do that. But without and now we can maybe move on from the sort of more.
I suppose I want to say a word on behalf of the primitive, in a sense, the primitive story of understanding. I think like beginnings of the projection of some kind of awareness of self onto environment, and then direct relationship with this, like thunder or lightning or fire or dinosaur. That's bigger than me, that's more than self. So I feel that's so, it's so important for us now, that we're able to relate to something bigger than ourselves in a tangible way. And
do you mean that the understanding can cause a distance between the thing itself? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah. That's definitely true.
Possibly. And I just want
definitely true.
So, and then my experience, I was thinking when you were talking about that, well, the river, if the river has a spirit, where did it begin? Where does it end? Does it end at the sea, or is it there at the first little drop on the top of Dartmoor, that tiny little pool that becomes the River Dart? Like which is the spirit? Where? And I think that's a really, really interesting question. It makes me want to really go and walk that road from the little thing just up on the hill over there, and ask.
Well, you should do that. See, so here's the answer that I'm hoping you'll get, because then it'll be like, it'll fit into the way my thoughts are going, which have been interesting me, because it feels like that it's like our use of the word spirit suggests a particular thing, like it's a spirit of the river.
Yeah.
What I'm playing with is that sense of which everything is this flow of information. I don't mean that in a reductionist sense, that. I don't mean it's just information. I mean, it's information as fire and Wayne and you and me and the mind and God. And but that as you walk that, you will be connecting with that, the whole past of water pouring down that hill. going back and back and back until it wasn't there. And that has a, like, if we took the word spirit, and one of the meanings of the word is essence, from esse to beef, it's being, it's essence. That there's an essence to everything based on its identity, which is its past, and that we can tune into that and have a relationship with it, which makes it intimate. And suddenly it's more than, you know, a rock. It's like, wow, there's a world in it.
Yes, I mean, I think I come back to the same place. I think I want to give space to the mysterious possibility that it might be conscious of itself in a way that I just don't understand. That it might have or that the river has an identity that, you know, in a sense, a river goes from where it begins to where the sea begins. So it has a beginning and an end.
Well, not really, because the water's passing through, and the water is the river.
That's true. And it's a landscape, isn't it? And it's a landscape. It's not.
You know, as Heraclitus said, you can't even step into the same river twice.
That's
so,
right.
So it troubles me, the idea of saying, you know, that actually going, no, metaphysically, I want to see this as conscious.
Yes.
I cannot, you know, there's a poeticness to it, which I can appreciate.
Can I tell you why? If I can be really personal about it, and it is poetic, but it's really emotional, actually.
Yeah.
It's really of the heart. Like, when I did this ceremony on my birthday nearly a year ago. And I went up on the hill and I lit a fire and I took my drum and I drummed and I said thank you for my life, and did all the things that I do in my little ceremonies. Spoke to nature, and I had my eyes closed and I was drumming with my eyes closed, and I was totally in the imagination of the fire in front of me and the wind and the trees and the river going past me. And it was like, wow, I'm really in touch with these beings. And then I heard this little voice in my head saying, Yaacov, open your eyes. It's not in your imagination. It's here in front of you. Open your eyes. And I opened my eyes, and the fire was burning in front of me, and the tree was dancing in the wind, and the river was singing, and the sky was total divine art. And I was totally blown away. And then I started to talk to the fire. And I learned in a ceremony from a guy from Mexico called Victor Sanchez, speak to the fire as if it's your grandfather. And since he said, if you do that and you really connect in your heart to the heart of the fire, you'll never be lonely. Because all you ever need is a candle in a room and your grandfather's with you. And to me, it was such a beautiful invocation of something.
Okay, so I actually really get that. Yeah. And this is something which it's a period of my life, it's so long ago, I really very rarely talk about it. But when I was 20, I had the most intense year of my life studying Western magic, which was Western shamanism, really. And in that experience, I had speaking to fire elementals, speaking to water elementals, earth elementals, gnomes, long conversations. I mean, I would walk alongside them and they would talk to me and we would talk to each other, and the water, especially, and the fire, all of those elements, really, and a complete breakdown in my experience between the imagination and the sensory world. They were the same thing. They were just, things would move between. It was very much one thing. And so I really get that. And part of what I've been trying to do, I think, for the last 40 years since, is kind of make sense of some of that, and what the hell was happening then, and so maybe the place where I've ended up somewhere slightly different right now is that it now feels that that the power of the imaginal is so strong that it can reach out and embrace that, and that the fact that I can't make sense of the fact that this fire has a particular spirit, or that you've got to, or the ayahuasca, which is you have a definite experience of meeting the spirit of the ayahuasca, but that's two plants. And so what happens? Does it? Whereas if I see it as the history, it feels like no, I'm just meeting everything that this combination of these two plants in interaction with human beings, all of its history, everything it's done, everything it's been, I'm tuning into that within this oneness of the imaginal, and it is speaking to me. But I don't have to make the jump to it's the same as it is with you or with another animate conscious being, and that then I don't have this whole problem of feeling like I've got to go into a state where I'm just willing to think that the fire is conscious, and what happens when I put it out afterwards if I just killed it. It's like all sort of things which really, if you think too much about them, suddenly don't make much sense.
I think it's about, in a way it's all about, I feel for me it's all about respect, really. Like if the fire is a being that is my grandfather, then even when I put it out, now I haven't killed him, I'm just putting him to sleep again. I'm laying him down. I'm kind of saying thank you. But as you were talking, I kind of got this sense of our imaginal world has come into being through our past, the power of our imagination.
Yeah.
What's to say it's not the same for those plants? That they have not in an embodied, not in the sense of living in that physical plant, but living in that combination, living in that alchemy, is an egregore, is a imaginal, something that's come into being in relationship to us.
So what would they be doing in that? What would their imaginal life be exactly? They're sitting there like, there's a plant here, it's just sitting there being a plant, or the one behind me sits in the corner of my office, don't go anywhere. And it's like, is it off in the imagination going, oh, I'm doing this and that? And it's like, is it really?
Well, I'm kind of thinking of Lynn McTaggart, who did all those experiments with wiring up plants and.
I can certainly see that they're interacting.
So there's something that's alive there. There's life.
Definitely. And I find it I do find it easier with a plant than I do with a rock again, or a fire, or things. I
understand it. I get in a way it's like
Although, can I just say, what's so interesting is that I can form that imaginal relationship just as easily with a rock or a river as I can the plant. It's only when I step back from that and go, what is that actually?
Yeah.
That then it feels like, there's something. I'm forced to question it. When I was a kid, I can remember so vividly getting so upset that we were going to get rid of our car because I had a relationship with our car. I spoke to it. It spoke to me. It's like, and my teddies, all of them, they all had identities. Mm. But now here as a 60-year-old man, I don't actually think they did. I don't think that they were actually having an imaginal experience. I think I allowed them to have an imaginal experience, and something real happened through it.
Well, with a car and a teddy bear are man-made or human-made, but a tree isn't, or a plant isn't, or a river isn't. It's not human-made. It's made of the same substance of us, but we didn't make it. So there's a difference with that. What I understand, what I'm kind of getting is like, I really get the need to understand, and it's like the very first question I ever remember that really fascinated me, which is unanswerable, but I love it and I come back to it again. All my life I come back to it, which is, okay, my rabbi told me God created all of this. I can experience all of this, like the vastness of this mystery. And okay, God created it. But what happened before that? And where did that come from? Like, what's that? Like that before God, or before creation, or before existence, what is that? It's that same, for me, it's the same place. Like I'm compelled to be in that question. And I love it precisely because it blows my mind. It blows my circuitry in the sense of I can't, I don't have yet the imagination to know.
Yeah. So what I think I'm trying to do with that, which is slightly different, I think, is to say, I really want that too. I love coming and doing ceremony with you. And when I'm doing ceremony with you, I'm not there going, how does this? It's like, so, fuck that, let's just, wow, this is great, and there's the fire, and it's, and right in there. And then when I step out, then I want to go, okay, so how does all of this integrate? How can I keep the integrity of that experience, but within an understanding which links it to the integrity of all of these other things, which we now know, and which dares to ask questions to move it on from, so that you can, and my experience throughout the 60 odd years now that I've been on the planet is that I can look at an experience and then I can see the same experience in a different way.
Yeah.
And then it can be more, or it can be different, and it's still what it was. So even with my journey, which has been about awakening and about love and about oneness, I now look at the experiences in the past and I see them differently. I thought at the time, I thought, like, this is it. And then it was like, oh no, it was it, but I didn't see this, did I? And now I see this. And
that's what I mean. It's like the capacity of your imaginal being, of your capacity to expand, to see another step of what's possible. That's what I feel. Exactly that, with that question of how can this fire, how could it possibly be an individual being? I love the question. I love that. I love that real, like focused. It's like mining for jewels. Focus of inquiry. I look like I'm going to stay with that until something goes. I get another pop of possibility, and
that's very much what I've been doing since we had the last conversation, actually, of doing that, of just thinking there is a way in which somehow there's a way in which we can, I've done the same with What's Before God. We won't get into that now, but this is, as this is what I spend my time doing. It's just holding those questions. And my experience is, if you do that actually things do arise, that the imaginal nature of you push it and you question, it's just like, wow. And then you're constantly hurled into a new universe through it. And the key though, it's like, I want to integrate it all. I don't want to end up with what's so limiting, and why we need about the scientific reductionist view, which I have so much respect for, because it's just so powerful. It's done so much in such a short time, but it reaches this point, which is the imaginal, and it just stops. And you and I have spent our whole life exploring this, which is huge and vast and wonderful, and this understanding just doesn't go into it. And somehow it feels like if we could have a trans-scientific spirituality, including that ancient shamanistic understanding of coming down into the earth, the ability to use the imaginal, the power of the narrative to shape things.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a podcast a few days ago with a guy called Danny Hill. He's a nurse, so he's working full out at the moment. Just amazing. I was so grateful that I didn't know he was a nurse. So to have an opportunity to go, wow, to give him a round of applause right there and then. Amazing. Anyway, he was talking about what's going on, and we were talking about hospitals, and my dream would be an integral hospital where you have your trauma therapists and your acupuncturists and your physicians and your surgeons and your shamans, like everyone's there. And and you're philosophers as well. Because
no one's going to want to see a philosopher in hospital.
Well, you never know. Depends what you're going there for.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Maybe if you realise you're not going to come out, you might.
Exactly.
We'll be the last. It's like they'll go through, and it's like,
oh no, last
Western
door.
medicine didn't work. We'll pass you on to the shaman. That didn't work. Oh, it's a philosopher for you.
You end up with him in the corner. Well, one thing I understood is that I recognise the difference between our roles in the system.
Yeah.
Like I recognise that your role as a philosopher is to do exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I have benefited from you doing that. You know, you've opened my mind to a bigger possibility than I had imagined so far through that vision questing, we might call it.
Yeah, it is vision questing. It really is. I mean, I really do feel it like that.
Yeah. And so I'm really wanting to honour the role of philosopher in our society, you and your role. It's to be honest with you, I've not really ever thought about it. Like, what's the role of a philosopher? And I'm really happy that you brought my attention to it and kind of go, oh, that's your job, that's your vocation, that's your consciousness is designed for that journey.
Well, I think you just brought up a beautiful example, which is very relevant right now as we're going through this health crisis, which we really haven't even mentioned, but it's there in the background. Is how do all those things? It's all very well to put them in the same building, and they're functional, they're tools, so they don't. You can just say, okay, you've just moved to a different paradigm, like we do with complementary medicine and Chinese medicine. But ultimately, what you really want is to go, oh, this is how it all fits together.
Yeah.
This is why it all works in different ways, and where things are strong. Because actually, it's one reality that we're in. Yeah. And if the maps don't fit together, the maps aren't quite right. And if they were right, they'd be more effective.
Yeah.
And that's that kind of. And my thing, like with this term trans-scientific, I'm trying out really, is going, we've gone from a pre-rational, religious mindset, and then come into this doubt and, thinking, and which has led to questioning nature and the scientific understanding. And then that's reached its limit. And then what spirituality, going right back to shamanism, has got to offer is what that's missing. And it feels like now we need to come back up and go, oh, you're missing all of this. And it fits with this. It doesn't, because I see a lot of people going, oh, get rid of that. That's horrible. And, that's all rational and scientific. And let's get back to this. And, and it feels like, no, let's go. Thank you very much. Now let's add this on top.
It would be ridiculous. It would be like, needing to fix your roof, building all the scaffolding, getting up on your roof and then throwing the scaffolding away. Just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just not sensible. It's not.
Yeah.
And I love trans-scientific. I just had to say, it sounds like a long train ride.
I love that. Yeah, let's go on the trans-scientific railway, and then let's transcend it.
Let's transcend it. But I love this. What you said. If they don't all fit together, then they're not right yet, or we haven't found. It's a puzzle. You're talking about the puzzle.
Yeah.
And it fits together into a wholeness.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's what we are evolving into. I wonder what happens when you get to that moment of the last piece of the puzzle and then you drop it into place. What's after that? That's like what's before God. What's after God?
Yeah, the disappointment of going, oh, that's what it is. Oh, right. Okay.
I think the second you drop that puzzle in, there'll be another big bang. Just go.
Yeah. Well, I think the metaphor for me would be that the reason it's such an interesting puzzle is that it's changing all the time, and the edges keep expanding, and it's actually a creative process that we're in. And the really interesting thing is the way we imagine it and think about it changes what it is, because it's part of reality. It's not this strange idea you get in a lot of modern culture, which is there's reality and there's us thinking about it. It's like, no, we are reality. We're the universe. What else possibly could we be? And we're the universe, having this imaginal experience, having all of these spiritual experiences. We're the universe dropping ayahuasca and going, whoa. And that's the universe doing all of these things. And it changes what the universe is. Every time we do that, the universe is a different place.
That's what I was going to say. I don't think I actually got to just that experience of the recognition of everything being everything. There's no exclusion. There's no exclusion of anything.
Yeah.
Or any, like, actually, I heard a dear friend of mine, a beautiful woman, she once said that she'd experienced in her meditation that there's not a single tear that's cried, or a single cry that's made, or a single moment of suffering or joy or anything that isn't witnessed by the beloved, by the universe, by life, that isn't part of this. Even though part of it apparently and right now is a sense of being isolated, or the needing to isolate. Being isolated doesn't necessarily mean isolation. We're discovering that a lot at the moment, through this extraordinary imagination that we've created called the internet, the World Wide Web. The Shaman I know love it that we have an internet. They're like, oh wow, you guys created one. Yeah, we've got one too. It's called universal consciousness. It's the World Wide Web. It's that access to consciousness, but we've made it into this physical thing. It's extraordinary, through which we can experience connection.
What your friend said about the tears, I think that's, for me, the emotive beauty of the idea that the past accumulates and is constantly present. It just means that nothing is lost in this idea, which is very popular, of there's only the present. That's all there is. Or there's two that are popular, both of which I dislike. One is that there's only the present. I don't even know what that could mean, really. And the other is it's all existed already, and it's just it's just a big. And yet this idea that no, everything, it's creative, so it's new and new and new, and yet it's creative on everything that's already happened, and nothing is lost, not even the tiniest of things. And that captures that, I think, that same spirit, and that's one thing.
I mean, that's evolution, isn't it? It's how something is becoming conscious. And I do pray that our current situation helps us to make a choice to become a bit more conscious. And, I know.
What do you make of it? What do you make of it? I've got to just tell you this because it just arrived today. It was someone sent me a message. I thought, that's a lovely thought. She said, I've got it here. I said, I also think that during this time, it's extremely interesting that we're all working towards the common good by all isolating and being apart. And I thought, God, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
That there's this,
It's a total paradox. We've
isn't
got
it?
Physical isolation and more of a sense of society than we have for a very long time.
That's it. It's beautifully put. Beautifully put. That's it. What a paradox.
It's a real strange paradox. And I saw your talk that you gave about this situation and about how upset you were, and clearly wanting to challenge the idea that this was somehow the Mother Nature giving us a slap around the face to wake up, and that we're being punished, and that we ought to. And you related that to the whole AIDS epidemic and with Christianity, and I found that really interesting, and I thought a lot about it, that sense of, and it really led me to the next thought I heard from you was the meaning that we choose to give to the suffering that this is causing. That's what matters here.
Yeah.
Whether we just kind of try to rush back to how things were, or whether we actually go, wow, your health system over there is my concern. actually, for my own selfish well-being, because we are part of something we can't be isolated. We're not isolated. We are connected.
Connected.
And that's the biggest, that's the biggest suffering I see, is that of the people have lost a sense of, or it's not even they've lost it, maybe they've never had it, a sense of real connection to themselves, to one another, to life, to the mystery, to their purpose, to their dignity, to their soul, to their sense of, this is what I'm here to bring as part of this evolution. That's for me the challenge we've got as human beings, is what meaning.
Yeah, and so just, I just said to Debbie, my wife, that I was looking for more insight. I just feel like I just haven't got enough insight on what this is we're in and where it's going, and because it's not gone on, probably don't know how long it's going to go on, and are we going to come out into an utter mess with masses of suffering and poverty, and especially in the third world, or is it going to be, and listening to you speak, then it just seemed clear to me that what we need to do is we need to ask ourselves, the one way, the answer is we don't know, probably, but that we know that what we're going to come out to is not going to be what we will be left behind. And it's going to be chaotic, and because of that, fluid, and that we need to ask ourselves, what sort of world do we want it to be?
Absolutely. I mean, this has been the deepest question that I keep coming to. It's like, I receive all these things about the Illuminati and 5G and the New World Order and all of that stuff, which it's a view. I'm not going to dismiss it out of hand. I'm sure there's lots of very bad people doing lots of very bad things in this world. It doesn't make sense to me that they're intelligent enough to get it together to be that organized.
No.
But having said that, that's about how we got here.
Yeah.
We're here because of them, or we're here because of this, or we're here because Mother Earth is giving us a slap round the face, or we're here because because pandemics happen. But that's how we got here. What matters, this is what I keep coming to, is what's my vision?
Yeah.
What could we make of this? This is an extraordinary, for people who are not directly on the front line of suffering, and who do have some kind of space to sit and be with these questions, and be with what might we make. It's really important to envision. I'm praying for. We need a vision. We need something that inspires us, something to live into or live up to.
And then the courage to actually step up and say, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really tough, but we've done, it's really tough, isn't it? Somebody Amanda Scott I spoke to. Do you know Amanda? She wrote the Boudica series. She's an extraordinary being, amazing being. You should talk to her. You'll find her very fascinating.
Okay.
I can't remember what we were talking about now. Lost my thread.
Well, I've got a thread. So unless it comes back to me, I, as you were speaking then, it feels like we've suddenly come back to the present moment.
Yeah.
With like where we right are. And when I invited you to have this conversation, we talked about you drumming and singing at the end, because that is beautiful and transformative and so much part of what you do. And I'm just wondering whether you could drum and sing us into a space where I and you and everyone who listens to this at any time can look at the vision of what do we want this to be, what world do we want to create from the chaos that we're going to find when we come out of this.
Yes, and that's precisely exactly what I was talking about with Manda, is that how do we create that vision that's inspires us something that to live up to. And yes, it's hard. That's right. She described it as, somebody had described it as like trying to turn a jumbo jet round in midair, and in midair transform it into a helicopter. It's like, it's that difficult. And I thought it
Yeah.
was a brilliant image. But we somehow, life has conspired. This is how it's happened, that we have stopped in midair.
Yeah.
And we are being asked to change into something, to change our view. So yeah, that's a beautiful invitation. And I would love to do that. I would love to make that invitation and also deepen it for myself and for you and for anyone who listens here. Yeah.
So let's actually just end with you and sound, and leaving all the ideas behind. So I'm just going to say now, thank you so much, Yaacov. And it's been a delight, as I knew it would be. And I'm just going to hand over to you. And then when you're done, I think we'll leave the words and we'll just be done. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you to you, Tim, and real love for you and respect for you. I've really enjoyed actually getting to know you more through this conversation and understanding your role more. It's really been helpful and beautiful, and yeah, very warm. Thank you. Okay. So just before we begin this journey, the purpose of which, as we've been talking about, is to help you to relax into the body and to open yourself to receiving new information, whether that comes in picture or in a sensation, a feeling in the body, in sound or words, ideas, really trusting your capacity to open to receive something new, something that inspires you, something that guides you through these difficult times and has you looking forward in a way which has meaning for you and brings dignity to the suffering that's in this world. So, very important that you take care of your body, that you don't push it. You can do this sitting down or lying. It's really good to stand up as well if you want to and let the drum move the body. Either way, really make sure you take care of yourself. Only go as far as you feel comfortable to go. That's for the body, also for your emotions, and let yourself be held by the gift that is gravity and the ancient call of the drum. Giving your weight now as you breathe out, giving the weight not just of your physical body, but also of your feelings, your thoughts, really receiving this gift of gravity, the attraction between the physical matter of your body and the earth underneath you. Imagine that as you let go, how you are, who you are, all of you, whatever your experience is right now, is being held in the warm embrace of this gravity, we might say the warm embrace of this great mama, this earth that provides everything. Breathing in and breathing out, breathing deeply, each out-breath, you acknowledge your condition and let a little bit more of your weight go. As you let your weight go, imagine roots, the roots underneath your feet, spreading out into a wide area around you, just like a tree whose roots spread out at least to the width of its branches to give it stability. Imagine now that through whatever part of you is in touch with the ground, this connection is made with your roots. The beautiful, dark, velvet embrace of the earth underneath you, holding you and me and all of us. With each breath, you can feel your heart settling. It's as if any stress, any fear that you've been carrying about what's going on in the world, any anxiety, can drop down through that contact with the ground, can also be held in this embrace. Please don't feel under any pressure to feel anything. Simply the body, gravity, the breath, the invitation to let go. With each out-breath, any of that anxiety or fear or extra stress drops down. It's as if there's more space inside the belly, inside the solar plexus, inside the heart. I see it as roots for the heart, so that whatever we are feeling or holding within our hearts, within our bellies, within our bodies, can drop down. Those roots spreading out, making connection. If you're in isolation right now, this is a moment where you might feel connected with all the other people taking this journey right now. Beautiful. Letting the body move or settle into stillness, whatever feels right for your body right now. The thoughts settling down. You can feel those roots and the trunk of your body supported, held, embraced, nourished by this feeling of giving in a little bit more to gravity. Gravity is the gift of the earth. Imagine now, above the heart, the shoulders, the arms, the throat, the head, connecting to the wide open space, like a tree in the spring, opening its branches to receive the new light of a new season of growing. Good. Let the imagination open to that wide open space, and from your heart, from your roots, from your body, from your being, calling out now for vision. Vision of the future that's not rooted in fear, but that's rooted in the possibility of human evolution as part of the web of life. Human presence that is beneficial to the web of life. A step forward as a species, where we might expand our consciousness a little, make space for what really matters, so that we can dignify the challenges, the difficulties, the suffering of this time, with a vision of the future that wakes us up in the morning with a smile deep in our bellies, the possibility of evolution, opening your mind, opening the branches of the tree of life inside you, calling for the light of new vision, whether it comes in picture, whether it comes in sound or sensation, calling for that now. Asking, praying, asking with your whole being for guidance, for you, for what matters, for who you are and who you can become. Simply receiving this guidance in the form of the light of the spring, the invitation for new growth, new understanding, new connections, new consciousness. Sensing the body, the ground, those roots, the trunk of the body spacious, relaxed, held, receiving this guidance like light, even if it doesn't make sense to you right now. Opening yourself to receive this guidance. It may come later in the form of a dream or a little moment of inspiration, a vision that dignifies you, that dignifies our species. Something to grow into, something to live for now, today. Breathing in that warmth of the springtime sun. Coming back into a sense of muscle and bone, those feet on the ground, wiggling those fingers and toes, and on the 9th beat of this drum, gently opening your eyes, being back, completely welcoming yourself back, nourished, strengthened by this journey, welcoming yourself back into the room where you are, the space where you are, into a gentle landing, taking a few minutes after this to sit, maybe to write, to drink some water, just to walk around, take a few notes. Sometimes what you received in the form of light can be understood more just by letting yourself write. Gently opening the eyes, coming back into the room, stretching the body. Deep breath. Thank you. And thank you, Tim. It's been a pleasure being with you today. Take care, everybody. Be well.